if you're watching this and be like, she's a climate change denier or not, I'm not a climate change denier because everyone thinks that. But I'm a climate alarmist denier.
Mm.
And I'm very passionate about countering climate anxiety with facts.
Hey, folks. I am so excited you're here. I am so excited to share this conversation that I just had with Lucy Biggers, who is an amazing content creator, voice on climate and how we can actually make a difference. How do we do that without getting overwhelmed by a lot of the narratives and the fear that tends to saturate so many of these conversations? We had an absolute blast talking about the data, the same data that is often used to tout these big, scary headlines that actually shows a much more nuanced and, frankly, approachable and hopeful even picture of what's going on with our climate. What are sustainable ways for us to actually make sure that we're not damaging the environment in order to save the climate? And so I absolutely loved this conversation. I think you're going to love it too. As a heads up, there was a little bit of technical difficulties about 3/4 of the way through the conversation, but I pray that doesn't show up too much, doesn't distract from the absolutely rich, substantive conversation that we had about how do we get out of this groupthink that tends to breed a lot of anxiety and a lot of despair and actually learn things, do things that help us to live better together in this world. So without further ado, let's get into this conversation between me and Lucy Biggers here on Leaving Groupthink Inc. All right. Thank you so much for joining us. This is Leaving Groupthink Inc. And I'm so excited to be joined right now by Lucy Biggers, who has an incredible story. She is currently doing social media over at the Free Press, which I love. And she's a former climate influencer. And that is definitely an issue very near and dear to my heart. So would love to get into just hearing more about your story. So just give us a little rundown of who
Yeah,
you are, what's your main political or policy interest, and then how have your views evolved over time?
of course. Yeah, thank you for having me on. And I love this concept for a conversation because the group think is a big thing that I've realized is a theme in my work of just when you get your ideas from a group and that's how you feel like you belong and you don't realize how quickly you stop thinking for yourself. And that's a Free Press tagline just to get, I
Yes.
started drinking this and I was like, ooh.
Yes. Free
Um,
press, free people. Amen.
exactly. So yeah, so I've been in digital media for many years. Started my digital media career in 2015 when I went to this company called Now This News, which if I mean we must be similar ages because if you know it, like some people who are younger than me don't know it, but very prominent digital video first on Facebook. I was one of the first hires there, and I was a producer there. And while I was there, we were all very Bernie Sanders people in the 20 teens, sort of like high off the Obama years.
Yep.
And yeah, over the years I was there, I just saw the newsroom get radicalized. It became a lot less about free college and it became about white privilege. It became about like the oppression Olympics. And as, a privileged person, I'm sitting there going, oh God, where do I fit in? And I'm not mathing out well for me. So
Right.
I felt like, okay, I want to fit in with the group and I want to atone for my position of birth, essentially. And so my outlet for that, beyond just being very left wing, was joining the climate movement and very much covering the climate movement and going, okay, well, my ancestors colonized America. And so if I cover this protest on Native American land, I can atone for that. And, the thinking kind of stops there. It's very emotional driven. And of course, now this is all in hindsight. I look back
Right.
and that's how I say I did everything. If you had told me at the time, I wasn't conscious of it.
Right.
And so a lot of my thinking was very black and white. It was very much getting acceptance from the group, whether that was my coworkers at Now This. And again, this is all sort of subconscious and it was never
Right.
explicit.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then obviously getting acceptance from the climate movement, which over the years that I was in it, I saw it become more and more radicalized. And it wasn't just like, let's lower our carbon emissions. It was, we've got to fight capitalism. We've got to fight colonialism. We've got to fight the West. The global North is oppressing the global South, and we've got to atone for that. So it was all crazy. And then leaving that in 2021, I had another job for a year before I went to the Free Press. and I had my son in 2022. And when I was leaving it, I was like ready to get out. I had had a lot of misgivings over the years, and or it felt increasingly out of alignment over time. And then I joined the Free Press, and as behind the scenes role, I was like, I'm just going to run their social media. I'm just going to take the back seat. I'm a mom. I got to focus on having my kids. And then earlier this spring, now my younger son, it turned 1, and I don't know if you have any kids, but that's
Yep.
kind of like a bear. You're like, hey, like my younger one's like 1. I'm like kind of like getting myself back, and I was like, you know what? I feel like I have something to say, and I don't want to be like on my deathbed one day with regret. And
Yes.
so I decided to jump into the controversy and I wasn't seeking out controversy, but I knew it
Right.
was gonna. So I decided I was like, you know, I just have to say what I know to be true, and come hell or high water, whatever happens, I'm ready for it, because I felt like my years at the Free Press really built me up,
Mm.
because our motto is think for yourself.
Yeah.
um, but truly, like seeing the models of my coworkers, Barry is the founder. She's had a
Mhm.
similar story.
Yep.
And so having that modeled to me for the 2.5 years that I've been here, it was like, okay, I can do this now too. So I put myself out there, I wrote a few pieces for the Free Press, which I think it maybe was when you first reached out. And
Yeah.
then I've like done a whole new wave of content this spring. So yeah, that's my story.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And I resonate with so much of it because, especially something that I found so interesting in your story is just that whole feeling that you have to atone for something. I think,
Hmm.
particularly climate, but in general, kind of the left wing ideology really kind of takes on this religious fervor. And you feel like it's definitely this sense of you have to make up for something that may not have been your fault, you had nothing to do with or
Right.
whatever else, but you kind of are in this place where it's like, okay, I have to it's a lot of pressure.
But yeah, this original sin idea that like,
Yeah, and I don't, you do have religious now. I wasn't before, but that part of it has always seems
well,
very interesting to me.
it's also interesting that you say like I have religion now, because I've had the same journey where like now I was raised Christian sort of culturally, but I
Mhm.
didn't really know the teachings. I wasn't didn't feel like I had like a relationship with God. And now and maybe it all kind of coincided at the same time, was going back to that faith. I moved back to my hometown from
Nice.
I'm in Connecticut from New York. It's not like a
Yeah,
crazy
yeah.
move. But like just having kids, finding your religion, all these things, you sort of can build yourself up
Mhm.
personally. And so you start to see how you were manipulated by a mindset for so many years. And it took the place of religion, and it preyed upon this idea that like you are not good enough just by being born. You have to do this, this, and this to be good. And so I don't know. I'm not even like all the way caught up on my religious teachings that I want to be, and that's like something I'm now getting more into. But I know that there's a theme there for sure.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting. I think the difference between Christianity and this, pretty much every false kind of religion, but especially this political thing, is that it's works based, right?
Mm,
Christ is like, I've taken on this
mm,
and given you the opportunity to make a way back to me through the cross. Whereas, progressivism or any of a number of different types of, spiritualities, they're all very works based. It's like you have to do
right.
this, do this, do this, do this, do this. And you're still never actually good enough, right? If you're
Right.
white, especially, like, you're never going to get, you're never going to stop having to do the work. You're never going to be done atoning.
It's
Um,
self-sacrificing too. And then I
exactly.
always think about I kind of reflect back on what was my mental state like. And it was so confused, and it felt very diffused. Like it was like my life force was diffused over
Mm,
trying to atone, trying to fit in, trying to say the right thing. A lot of fear
hmm
around the latest thing happening in the news, around the latest climate event, flooding or heat waves. Like every single thing, I found I was so much more susceptible to fear. And I lived with a base level of anxiety that
hmm
I thought was normal. And now I reflect on it, and I think it's another way that you get hooked in, because well, you have to be paying attention to the news. So you're a responsible citizen. And then if I was to say, well, I don't feel anxiety, they go, well, because you're a privileged woman. Of
mm,
course you don't feel, because I made a video about it the other day. And like in the video, I was like, I don't feel fear every day when I listen to the news, because I pick and choose what
right.
is relevant to me and what's not. And most of the things I cannot change. I follow
Right.
my things that I follow. And I do not walk around with anxiety. And then I go, oh my God, if I was still in the movement, the next thing would have been, well, you're a white privileged woman. Of course you don't, because you're in a privileged space, and so it's just funny, like, you're like, "Oh my god, there's so many mental things that they do to keep you trapped," and, like, the "they" is, like, I think it's a blob. I don't even know who's pulling the strings at this point. It's a million little actors
Yep,
in the DMs on your Instagram or in the comments trying to tear you down, and I think I'm just really lucky that I've had this, like, insular bubble at the Free Press where I'm with such free thinkers. I sound so
that
cliche.
is.
But
It's
it's
yeah.
so nice. So then, like, I kind of don't even realize how toxic it is out there still because 'cause I'm, like, so insulated where I work.
Yeah. No, it's so true. I think for me, having a similar sort of situation, one, just there is that sense again of, even almost an implicit idea that your feelings, so much of this activism, and I think one of the reasons why I've created this project about leaving Groupthink Inc. is that this industry, right, these interconnected industries of advocacy groups and political spaces, media that are ideologically captured, is real action has been replaced by this psychological thing, right?
Mm,
You have people feeling like they're doing activism by being in your DMs, right?
right.
And, kind of policing your emotions and your reactions. And there's this sense that if you're feeling bad enough, that somehow that does something. But
Mm.
it's like, no, it's like almost like prayer in reverse, right?
Yes.
It's like the
It's
idea that if you
so
just feel
true.
bad enough, if you just, make other people feel bad and get angry or get stressed about
Right.
something, that in itself is going to accomplish something, which of course it has no power to.
Yeah.
And it
Oh my
actually saps
gosh.
your power to be able to do anything.
And I think about that a lot, and the way that I've been describing is it's like there's so many people living in projection and fear,
Mhm.
and all their mind is there and their energy is there, and I'm like, "I'm trying to bring you down to facts
Yes.
and reality," because that's the only place we can make a change is if we
Exactly.
have empowered people who are embodied as humans and acting from a place of authentic power. And you're right, this keyboard warrior activism, it's so old, it's so played out. It
Yes.
and like you said, it doesn't even do anything. So it's the memes, like, and I
Yep.
see the wave of the memes every month. There's a new wave of memes. I go here, oh, they're activated again. Here come
Yep.
the bots, and like they're not bots, they're humans,
Right.
but they are just. And I know the ones in my feed that are friends that I've known, like whatever people that I still follow, and I'm like, here they go again. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like exactly. And that's one of the things that I love about your content is that you are really trying to bring people back to like, what can we do about this? Something I talk a lot with my clients. So I do still do some comm strategy and training with folks, policy experts and people who are trying to communicate these kinds of ideas to the public. And I'm always like, especially with climate, if you send the message that this is just all hope is lost,
Right.
everything is doom and gloom, it's terrible, like really there's no reason for anybody to take action. There's no reason for anybody to do anything, try to
Right.
advocate for any policy because you're telling us all is lost. Then why
You
shouldn't
might
we
as well
just
just
kind of
throw your garbage out the window and like
exactly? I'm
gas
like this
guzzle.
that just makes me just want to cuddle up with some Netflix and a
Yeah.
bag of Cape Cod chips until the last iceberg melts. Like that doesn't make me want to do anything. And so, yeah, tell me how you've started to talk about your journey and how you've made that change. But can you tell me about was there like a turning point
Mhm.
moment or something that kind of woke you up and started you questioning the ideas in your groupthink bubble?
Yeah. I think I always had misgivings, and I always sort of felt like there was a forward-facing, like, persona
Mm-hmm.
that I was putting on to play the role of, like, the good ally, I guess
Mm,
you could say, and then
yep.
I always felt like if it was a pie chart and I was covering climate, I would cover this much of the pie chart, and then there was all this complexity and nuance and, unintended consequences, cost benefit of you say solar's so pretty, and then it's like, okay, but there's the mining and dependency on China, and there's the land use, and there's the recycling, and there's the
Mm-hmm.
e-waste, and they're like, and it's not reliable and it's expensive, and but I would be like solar. So I always had a little bit of that, and I did not acknowledge it. One thing I will say that was a salient moment that sadly it took this has almost happened 8 years ago, is after I covered Standing Rock, which was
Mm,
the Dakota Access Pipeline protest in
yep.
Dakota against a gas pipeline that was put in, was already under construction, already approved, legal, above board. Honestly, not even a huge impact. It was like going under a river next to a Native American reservation, already approved, whatever. There was a huge protest there. I went, I covered it. I also made it go super viral on social media. After we left there, there was reports of the millions of pounds of trash
Mm,
that were left behind.
I remember that.
And I remember I had been covering it for months, and it was like, do I cover the trash that was
Mm,
left behind? And I was like, I don't want to, because I don't want to sully this image of the movement that I'm painting in this black and white way. Like, this movement is good. It's on the right side of history. I can't show the trash because it messes with the story. So like that,
mm.
and I didn't publish it. And so I had that. And I always say, like, if you got me a few glasses of wine, I'd be like, actually, like, Standing Rock's kind of bullshit. Like, you know, like, I was a hypocrite,
Yeah.
basically, even though I wouldn't admit it. So I was like public facing, whatever. And then I think, like a lot of people, I mean, becoming a parent and then living through COVID was first for me, and then becoming a parent. Both of those things, I mean, I saw during the lockdowns, what was it, like 5% of our carbon emissions went down and the entire world was shut down. 5% like dip. And I go, wait a minute. If we're trying to get to net zero by 2050, what do they want us to do? Because I don't want to live in a world where the world shut down. Like, I'd rather live with climate change.
Right. It's true. It's like, what are the
Yeah.
trade-offs we're making here?
Yeah, I was like, wait. And then also I had been so afraid of plastic, and everybody always was like wearing plastics like masks. And I was like, wait, like, I could not use a straw for the rest of my life. And like, we've gone through more in a day than like whatever. So like little things like that. And then I read, I don't know if you're familiar with Michael Schellenberger. He has this
Hmm.
book called Apocalypse Never,
Yes.
which I even read that actually in 2019 secretly. So my misgivings were there. It was always like death by a thousand cuts. But like, and
Hmm.
then I think the biggest changing point was for me when I got to Free Press. One of the first pieces I pitched, I was like, I made Standing Rock go viral and I regret it. And that
Mm.
was great because I got support to write that. And then I didn't really like come back really online, because actually it came out like the day before my second son was born. I was like,
Wow.
I don't have the capacity to get back into it. And then a whole year passed. And then this year, I don't know. I don't know. I just started reading stuff and I was like, holy crap. It got to the point where I was like, you know what? If I don't speak out, this is actually doing harm.
Mm.
And so just like, I don't like the renewable energy sector. I think like the developments of wind and solar, I really am actually like against most of it, unless it's
Yeah.
like on your roof. I think
Yes.
solar's fine on your roof, but like, I don't like that it's going in the farmlands. I don't like that it's
Yes.
going in the water off of the coasts of America, the US. Like, and I was just like, this is actually really bad. And if it wins, I don't want to live in a world where the climate movement wins.
It's so
So yeah.
true. It's so true. Thank you for bringing that up because I think that's a really big point. I also had read Apocalypse Never, but I think a couple years after it came out, and that was one of the things that really kind of stopped me in my tracks. One, I love that you were like, I read it secretly because that was
Yeah.
me for a few years. I went silent for a few years during and after COVID, where I was just kind of like rewiring my brain
Right.
with all sorts of things. I had so many questions. For me, COVID was a big turning point.
Yes.
But I remember because I had started to feel a little bit, having a lot of misgivings because I was like, I knew I was involved in things that were like really like what we were saying and what we were doing did not match. And
Mm,
then I also had those moments where we'd be having conversations with people, and these people who were making like tons of money to advocate for certain causes would be at the bars and they'd just be like, yeah, I think we've already lost. I think humanity is actually kind of doomed. And I'm like, then why are you cashing our members' checks? But so I
yeah. I mean, that's so real. Ugh,
Exactly. And so
yeah.
I was kind of like, all right, I like there's stuff. And then after a while, you just can't ignore it. Like sometimes you just kind
Right.
of go along to get along. You're like, this is my
Right.
job. These are my friends. This is my
Right.
whole, my whole world is wrapped up in it. But then, looking at it, I was like, especially on the climate issue, it was like, okay, but in our pursuit of decarbonizing everything and making carbon like the thing we have to get rid of,
Yeah.
if we're destroying entire ecosystems, what are we doing?
No, I
Like
know.
you're literally like, we
They're
have
like,
to
we're gonna
destroy the
tear down the
environment to save
forest.
it.
It's like,
What? You're
no,
killing,
exactly.
ocean wildlife and,
Cure is worse than the disease.
exactly. It's like if you're
Yeah.
literally obliterating the natural environment where you're putting these things, what is the point
And
of
yes. And so were you was the movie you were involved in was climate, or what was your advocacy?
So I have done like just about
Yeah.
everything. I've had like 80 lives, and I think I'm a slightly elder millennial to you.
Yeah, yeah.
But so I started off anti-war activist after 9/11. My dad's a 9/11 survivor, and then through that got into really like human rights in a
Mhm.
broader sense. So I did a lot of stuff with like Amnesty International and groups like that, like
Yeah.
end of high school, beginning of college, and then I started to get into, anti-sweatshop movements, abolition. I then was an education major because I decided, oh, my activism will be teaching. Like, I'll go
Right.
teach the
Right,
kids so they
right.
can be engaged citizens and all the things. And so I got into all that kind of stuff, went to teach for a few years, got in trouble. So then I became a full-time activist.
Oh my god.
And I started blogging and organizing on social media. So kind of one of the first to really be on social
Mm,
media when it first came out and start to use it for activism instead of just like taking pictures of
mm.
your lunch. And so and so that through that started to get more involved in the labor movement, which that's like one of the things that I've like kind of stuck with
Yeah,
throughout all of this. But then started doing women's rights, civil
right.
rights, was mobilizing Black voters in 2020. So I've run through a lot of these
Yeah, you've done
different
them all.
things. But from like big international and national organizations down to like small grassroots, I've seen these
Yeah.
through lines of
Oh,
where this
yes.
ideology kind of breaks down.
I see it too. I see it. It touches everything. It's so
Yeah.
interesting. And I think it comes down to what is true.
Yeah.
If I had to boil it
Exactly.
down, it's like it's a false ideology. And
Yes.
I'm trying to explain what is true. And when you look at the climate stuff, I don't know how familiar you are with it or I can explain it to your viewers, but
Yeah,
like,
please.
okay, so a lot of the fear that we see around climate change is not from things that we have observed over the last 30 years, but it's what the scientists model or
Mhm.
predict is going to happen. So we all see we have 10 years to do X, Y, and Z, right? They'll say, we
Yeah.
have 10 years to fight climate change. We have 10 years. That was a huge trigger for me almost 10 years ago now. Look, we've survived, guys.
Yes,
But,
we're still here.
um,
The apocalypse didn't happen yet.
yeah. So, so basically, what you realize when you dig into the climate science, and I'm not a scientist, I'm just a former climate activist, and I come from a place of knowing the inside of like the activism mindset.
Mhm.
And I stand on the shoulders of amazing scientists who are kind of been pushed out of the mainstream, who are very talented, and they have brought all this to light. And I just am a communicator. But basically what they show, and also, by the way, this is in every climate report. It's
Right.
not hidden information.
Exactly. No, it's
It's
been there
not.
this whole time.
Yes, exactly. So I should even say it's mainstream science to say there are no upward trends for hurricanes, floods, wildfires, droughts, extreme heat. There are no upward trends based on climate. We have not observed an upward trend over the last 30 years on any of the things I just named. Like, that is
Right.
not common knowledge. And
Right.
what happens is the media has people like me who work in a newsroom, who are activists in a newsroom. You're bought into the climate agenda. So you don't
Mhm.
really actually care what the truth is because climate change is so life-threatening that you have to just put the story out there to get people to start to care. So responsible scientists will say, well, we cannot tie any event, any hurricane, any wildfire, anything to climate change because climate change is something you observe over 30 years. So who's to say, hurricanes have always happened. So like,
Right.
you can't say any specific hurricane was made because of or made worse by climate change, but the journalists don't care. So they've just gotten really lazy about it and they connect everything to it and they do really manipulative tactics that I
Mhm.
like to think are just because they care so much about climate. That's what I'm going with. It's not a conspiracy here. It's just idiocy and laziness and they don't check. They have confirmation bias. One thing that they've done really badly is because there's no upward trend of hurricanes. The hurricanes have actually decreased slightly, which is crazy. You'd never know, right?
Yeah.
But the way that they get it to seem like it's worse and have, that upward to the right chart, you want to see an upward to the right trend is they say, well, $1 billion damages have
Mm.
increased by
Yes.
10x and climate change is already here. And so I just did a video on this and I was looking it up and like the Biden administration was saying this. They're saying climate change is already here. We can see it by the 10x increase in the $1 billion of damages from hurricanes. And then in the same article, climate scientists are like, this is not because of climate change. We cannot with confidence say this is because of climate change. It's because we're a more affluent society
Right.
and more people live in Miami. Like Florida's population has increased by 7x in the last 100 years. The hurricanes have stayed exactly the same, and we have more wealth. And what we sneeze now and it's $1 billion, like with
Right.
inflation, like a tough rain is $1 billion. So anyway, all the information's out there, but the way that our media system is so corrupted by laziness and confirmation bias, it does not break through. And if you are someone who's an independent thinker, you get pushed out of those institutions. You get pushed out because there's a lot of money to be made to get your research pushed. And so if you're watching this and being like, she's a climate change denier or not, I'm not a climate change denier because everyone thinks that. But I'm a climate alarmist denier.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very passionate about countering climate anxiety with facts
Yes.
because climate change, it's not really something to be afraid of. Listen, it could change tomorrow, but based on what we've observed for the last 30 to 150 years, it's survivable. Like the climate's
Right.
been warming since industrial age. Okay, what's been happening in the last 150 years? The most abundance we've ever seen in the history. We've been great. I think humanity's done great in the last 150 years. We had 1.3 degrees of warming. They're saying we're going to have another 1.3 degrees in the next 100 years. And it's just kind of like, okay, what's the big deal? Like, it- so when you actually look at the facts, you shouldn't be afraid. But again, there's so much fear. There's so much projection. Everyone's emotionally entangled and meshed. Their nervous
Mm.
systems are shot. They see one headline, they see a fire, they say, "Oh my God, the world is burning," or it's the
Mm.
polar bears are dying, or we're all underwater. And when you actually look at the data, none of it, the observational data, it's not bearing out. And to push the narrative, you have to depend on models that don't come true or on these $1 billion in damages, which it's easily debunked.
Right.
So, I mean, I could go on forever. The facts are there. It's crazy. And like, I don't know. I always remember would be like, that person's paid by the fossil fuel industry or
Mm.
something. And I'm just like, I'm not. I literally am on a salary job at the Free Press.
Right.
This is my side hustle. I'm obsessed with this. I hope I can do this full time eventually and really keep talking about it. But it's just, it's not bearing out.
And that was such a good point about those projections. And I was just about to ask you, who are some of the voices that you've been listening to, some of the scientists and other folks?
Yeah.
Because I know once I started realizing that, oh yeah, some of the projections, like the assumptions and the data that's baked into those projections is out of date.
Right.
And
Exactly.
so we can't actually be still making they're relying on things that, like, the dates have passed, the information is out of date, the certain assumptions that were baked in didn't actually pan out now that we've gotten some distance in time.
Mm-hmm.
And so who are some of the voices, some of the scientists that you listen to, as well as, have you found any good resources to help you dig through? Because I know some of these reports are really dense.
Mm-hmm.
But you can just go into any of them and you can see this same
Right.
information. It's just not as headline grabby as
Exactly.
the activist talking points.
Oh my God, I know. Yeah, so a few people. Alex Epstein, who wrote Fossil Future, is awesome. His other book is Moral Case for Fossil Fuels. Love him. So I got into him a few years ago. Roger Pike,
Mm.
Pielke Jr., Roger Pelkey or Pike Jr.
Yeah.
He's great. He has a account called The Honest Broker. Matthew Walecki has a subset called Irrational Fear.
Mm.
And his is Wiellicki. Judith Curry is also a former green activist who has spoken out and has a book. Steve Koonin is a former President Obama energy guy who's in his 70s now, and he speaks out. So a really big resource just came out from the Trump administration's Department of Energy that
Yes.
Chris Wright commissioned. And okay, it's getting like maligned in the press, obviously, because
Yep.
everything does. But Steve Koonin and Judith Curry were authors on that. And they were already two people that, to me, I was like, oh, I trust them. I
Yep.
know that they're like the real deal. They're not ideologues. They're not political. If anything, they're like old school liberals who are just like, this is not responsible at this point.
Yeah.
So a lot of my videos, if you go on my Instagram, that I like have screenshots, it was actually their Department of Energy report that just came out, where the whole point of the report was like, we want to bring into the public awareness areas that are not getting coverage by the media that are really important that the science is saying that
Right.
everyone's taking out of context. So they just went through like hurricanes, tornadoes, wildfires, and they're like, guys, you need to understand, like, wildfires peaked in the 1930s. They're down by like 5x since then, but they're up since the 1980s. And so the media just says, well, they're up since the 1980s, but it's not like historically unprecedented. So there's like a million things like that. The fact
Right.
that like our planet is 15% greener because plants love carbon dioxide. And actually, I don't know if you know this fact, but I think this is so interesting, is that like professional growers who have greenhouses will put their parts per million of CO2 up to 1200 ppm to
Wow.
make the plants grow bigger, where we have right now 420 ppm
Huh.
in our atmosphere. And it was like 400 ppm like a decade ago or something. It's like it raises about, but mind you, this is 0.04%
Right.
of our atmosphere is carbon dioxide. So it's such a minuscule amount. But to say that like going from 400 to 420 to like even if we get up to 700, whatever, like that's actually good because crops love it. Like crops actually, when they have more CO2, they need less water. Because if we're going to go back to our biology days, I don't know if you remember, but remember like
Yep.
plants have this thing called the stomata on their
Right. Right.
leaves. So
You open
when
up.
there's
Yeah.
more, so CO2 is like the main food of a plant. So when there's more CO2 in the atmosphere, that stomata has to stay out open less because it catches the CO2 more often. And so when there's less CO2 in the atmosphere, it's staying out longer and then the water evaporates out of the open stomata.
Mm.
And then when there's more CO2, it's open for less time, closes because it's got its fill. So like just like that is so cool. And I didn't know that. And when I was in my climate change days, I thought CO2 was a poison. I didn't even know the facts. I was just like CO2, it's choking us. Like I'm filling up my car with gas, being like, I'm scared, like or like going by my exhaust pipe and being like, like whatever. Like I just didn't understand that it was part of a cycle and like ultimately sure it's not ideal I guess to be adding more, but when you look at the fact that it's powered our modern lives and the side effect is a plant food, I'm like this is actually a beautiful system and versus the side effect of what solar is e-waste that we have to somehow get rid of and recycle and the same thing with wind turbines. So yeah.
That is such a good point. Something else that I thought was so interesting as you're bringing this up is because there is that narrative pressure, right? Like if we see there's certain facts that are, kind of clearly laid out, and then there's this this narrative that you're supposed to go along with. And if you don't go along with it, you're a climate denier,
Right.
you're all those different, slurs basically. And that's one of my major interests is the activist and academic forces, activists in academia as well as activists within organizations, nonprofits, because some of them getting a lot of money. Um, but I think it's so interesting because I feel like that's where some of that is coming from, right? It's people's jobs to kind of manipulate how certain things are interpreted, to malign certain voices so that people just dismiss what they're saying on site because they can't necessarily dispute the facts, but what they can do is make the messenger seem untrustworthy
Mhm.
so that, oh, Michael Schellenberger, he must be in the tank with the fossil,
Right.
industry, or, this new person, she must be. And so I think there's that's one of the dynamics that I'm really interested in kind of exposing so that
Yes.
people can actually just take in the truth and assess claims on their merits instead of immediately falling for that thought stopping tactic of, oh, that
Mm.
person's a climate denier
Mhm.
or that person is a shill for the fossil fuel industry or things like that. And so on that note, what were things that helped you to see past that, right? To actually give these new authors, these scientists who were going against the party line in their field, what helped you to give them a fair shot? And
Mm.
what would you tell your younger self if you could go back and talk to her
Mm.
and be like, hey, you don't have to freak out so much about this? Like, what would you tell her about giving some of these people a chance or giving new ideas a chance?
I mean, it's such a great question. I think it's such a puzzle for humanity because obviously we see this issue repeat itself. And yeah, I'm just even thinking about Schellenberger. It's like, I think I read his book and I loved it. And then I think I heard people say, oh, well, he's a shill, and you're going, and I go, oh, and then I get insecure again. And I'm like, don't trust myself. So I'm like, okay, I guess like my instincts were wrong, even though like a lot of that resonated with me. And same thing, even with my boss, Barry, I thought she was a really bad person when I worked at
Mhm.
Now This because of her reputation leaving the New York Times. And I think because she was pro Israel and stuff. And so my coworkers, I picked it up by osmosis. I didn't even really know why. I just knew she was bad. And the reason I was able to even give her a chance is because my coworker at the time, who was a libertarian, knew Barry. She's a young girl. Her name's Ricky Schlott. And she was like, oh, I love Barry. I listened to her podcast. Like, Lucy, you would love her. Having just knowing me in real life, but I was still very left. She was like, you'd love her. And I listened to her podcast and it was sort of a private experience. And I almost like didn't want people to like see it on my phone
Wow.
as if like that's how self-censoring I was. And then I listened to it and it was a really good conversation with her talking about actually it was right after Roe v. Wade got overturned, and it was with Caitlin Flanagan, and they were just talking about the nuance of what abortion was like before, but also why Roe v. Wade legally didn't have good founding. And I was like, whoa, this is the best conversation I've heard in so long. And I was so starved for that. But going back to the idea of how do I get through to my younger self, and I think it's trusting myself when I would come across stuff that seemed true. I think it's like I would have glimpses of it and then I would go back in
Mm.
and go back to that deferring to the group. Other people know better than me. So I'm even though like this resonated with me. And again, this ideology ultimately it's so exhausting, it's so
Mm.
depleting, it's so depressing. There's no hope. You hate yourself. You hate your civilization. You hate the West. You think the world's going to end in 10 years. Like, it's depleting. It's depressing. Even if you don't think about it consciously every day, it was sort of running and subconsciously in the background.
Yeah.
So ultimately, I feel like something had to give because want to choose like life and vitality. And that's my natural disposition. But I feel like over these years, it was like I got pulled further and further away from like who I was, being proud of who I was, being proud of how I was raised and being proud of my country. And then ultimately, I think it was just sort of like self-preservation where I was like, I have to like choose myself. And by the way, and to say choose myself, that's the first step. It doesn't mean I'm a selfish person now and I don't
Right.
care about anything, but it's like I had to then go inward and spend years building myself up foundationally on what do I believe? And even just reading books is really important. Like
Yes.
I don't know if you know Douglas Murray, and people will
Mm.
say he's a white supremacist. I'm like, okay, they love to throw that around. His books and his work is really grounding for me, and just
Mm.
understanding what the West has to offer and why America is actually very exceptional, even though we have a colored past we can take it all in together. And also surrounding yourself with other people whose opinions you respect, whose lives you respect. I think
Yeah.
like look at people whose lives and dispositions you respect, because I think very ideological people are not going to be happy. They're not going to be present and kind. And so when you see someone who, lights up a room, whatever, that's so
Mm.
cliche, but when you see someone who is really embodied in a way that you respect, that's a really good sign of like, okay, what does that person have? And it
Mm.
might be just a confidence in themselves and an acceptance of self. And realizing, you cannot change the world from a disempowered place. And also, it's not your responsibility as one person to change the entire world. You should be able to change your personal world, your life, your friends, your coworkers, and that's enough. And I think when you have young people caught up in groupthink, they get hijacked. Their empathy gets hijacked into, well, I want to be a good person and I want to change the world, so I'm going to sacrifice myself for the
Mm.
good of the cause. And they kind of have it backwards because then ultimately you can't really make a change. You just kind of become a robot for that sick movement that we've talked about. That's sort of a
Yeah.
through line through all of this.
Absolutely. That's so many good points there. And I think especially just this piece around people really getting into this mindset where they feel like it's again, it goes back to this works-based weird pseudo-religious zeal, right? Of like, it's all on us to save the world. This
Right.
idea that it was wild to me. I was thinking about how many little kids even, and there's this rise, especially in the younger generations, of climate anxiety. And it's like, of
Right.
course, because if you're thinking that it's on your little tiny shoulders, baby Atlas, to save the entire planet, like, of course you're going to be anxious. That's
Yeah,
not your job. It's not your responsibility. And
it's
so I
not.
think
It's so
absolutely.
bad. I
And I
also
think
yeah, go ahead,
Oh
go
yeah,
ahead.
go for it. So yeah, no, the other thing I loved is just the way you were saying how you would have those moments of questioning, and then the group, right? Either you're knowing that the group would criticize, or hearing those critiques, would kind of pull you back out of
Mhm.
sort of that objective awareness of, wait a minute, something's not lining up here. And so I was really glad to hear you say that you had a friend who thought a little differently. It seems like that's also a really key thing, right? It's having some different voices around you who can
Mhm.
kind of pierce that groupthink bubble a little bit, so
Yeah,
that you
and
have
I
another
will say,
yeah,
no, it's so important, and I think that's a huge, like, one of my whys now for making content because I
yeah,
think the people that I can impact where they might see themselves in me, maybe they were a former activist or they're a former very left or whatever, and I'm more palatable than Ben Shapiro or something who
yep,
says facts don't care about your feelings, which it's like, actually, that is a really great slogan. But you're not going to hear it from him
yep,
because you don't like him and he's polarizing or whatever. And I got when I first started making content, one of my what happened all of the time in the first, like, 2 or 3 weeks of me putting myself out there is the messages that I got.
mm,
The text messages from people I haven't spoken to in 10 years, voice
wow,
memos from people, direct messages, private, saying, "I've had such a similar evolution to you. Thank
mm,
you so much for speaking out. You are so brave." And I was so honored that they trusted me with that message because I think about how much Barry, my boss, her example inspired me. And then now that story is a few years old, or like you don't necessarily relate to her, but it's like then it's almost this like unfolding where I'm like, now I hope my story inspires other versions of me. And if more and more people can just stand up in
yep,
their power and say, this isn't true. Like, it really
yeah,
comes down to that. It's like not wrong and right side of history. It's like, what is true?
yes,
And that's one thing I've also realized because in one of my earlier videos, I was like, and then I found out my truth. And someone was like, you're still kind of in the left mindset. Like, you're saying my
relativistic,
truth.
yeah,
They're like, what is true? And I was like, that's so true. That's so true. So
yeah,
it's such an interesting thing where, like, there are actually fundamental truths that you can find in our Constitution about life and liberty and the
yes,
value of human life. And I think even in the fundamentals of like capitalism or like just being like, okay, what's the best system that aligns with the truth of human nature?
yes,
Industry and desire to provide for your family versus you have socialism, which preys on the desire to be good and your empathy, but then the result does not create good results and it's actually false. So,
right.
yeah, I don't know. There's so much there. And again, it's like I go from like climate to like socialism, but it is like you're saying, it's all connected.
No, it's so true, and I think there is that piece again because they're all the through line that one of the through lines is that relativistic worldview, this idea that there isn't actually a set truth, but that it's subjective, that
Right.
and I think that again is completely at odds with a world where there are actual fundamental, laws of nature, laws of logic.
Hmm.
There's also this denial of because that relativistic thing ultimately, I think, going back to the spiritual aspect of it, right, is that we have on the one hand this good part of us, right, that's made in God's image, that wants
Right.
to do the right thing, that knows the moral thing to do because that's written on our hearts. But we also have that sinful part of us, and I know that's like a really off
Yeah.
limits term, but it's true. Like there is a part of human nature that is greedy, that
Yeah.
is lazy, that does want to actually, get its own advantage at others' expense. And so when we don't have systems that account for that, right? Socialism doesn't account for the fact
Hmm.
that, I think a lot of times when people disparage capitalism, what they really don't like is greed, right? It's the
Hmm.
sin that actually makes the system bad. And
Hmm.
so if we don't acknowledge that part, then if you could get rid of capitalism overnight because you think you can't green the planet, right, without socialism or whatever it is, but all you would do is incentivize the people who would be greedy to
Right.
then join positions in government. And now
Right.
instead of being able to get away from people like that by not doing business with them or not working with them.
Mm.
Now you're in a situation where you're forced to deal with them because they have the power of the state behind them. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think that's part of the issue, right? Is that it's, if we deny fundamental things about human nature, if we deny fundamental things about nature, then we
Mm-hmm.
can't come up with good solutions because we're going against reality. And so I
That's
love
so true.
everything that you had to say there. Thank you so much for being willing to take the time to share your
Yes.
story and all this good information. Where can people find you if they want to, keep up with your amazing videos and just all the stuff that you're sharing?
You're amazing. I'm obsessed with you. Um, so this is one of my favorite conversations. You're so smart. And I love the connection between like psychology, spirituality, and all this. Like, it's like the same like reason why I love it too. It's like not even just about like following breaking news and calling out Greta Thunberg
Yeah.
for being crazy. It's like the human condition
Mm.
and being part of systems that don't work. And I think you and I are seeing the same problem in the system. And like, it's like, okay, we have to call this out because this is
Yeah.
not humans at their best. We actually have a capacity to be so industrious and amazing and creative and like I don't know. Anyway, it's everywhere now. So I really appreciate this conversation. But if you want to
Yeah.
follow me, everything is like my name. So Lucy Biggers on Instagram, TikTok. I'm on Substack Notes, and then on Twitter I'm just LL Biggers. But really, I post everything on every platform. So find me wherever. And then I work at the Free Press, and our website is thefp.com, or we're like the Free Press on socials. So yeah, thank
Beautiful.
you so
Thank you
much. You're
so
amazing.
much. This was an amazing conversation and look forward to keeping up with you on all the platforms.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for watching. If you appreciate what you just saw, then please support this channel with a like, a comment on YouTube, share it with some folks you know, and subscribe on Substack and on YouTube. And if you'd like to continue to expand your mind while supporting this work at no extra cost to you, please check out the links in the description and the pinned comment where you'll find some great news resources, books, and ways we can work together. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.